Welcome to The Explainer. You ever watch a pro athlete and just wonder, what is their coach actually seeing? Well, today, we're going to break that down. We're turning that simple act of watching into a real science. We're going to build, from the ground up, a complete toolkit for analyzing human movement. It's going to help you see the details that everyone else misses. And spoiler alert, it all comes down to having a structured approach.
All right, so here's the game plan for today. First, we'll get into how to see movement like a scientist. Then we'll look at the two main lenses for analysis, using words versus using numbers. From there, we'll dive into a super powerful four-stage framework. This is the real heart of it, and we'll wrap up by looking at the physics that makes it all tick. Okay, let's jump right in. First up, we have to learn to see with some serious precision. It's all about making a mental shift, right? We're going from being just a fan watching the game to being a focused biomechanist, someone who really understands the mechanics.
So how do you actually do that? How do you go from just watching to, truly analyzing? Well, it all starts with this really cool, simple idea. Imagine all human movement happens through three different panes of glass that slice right through the body. Getting a handle on these planes, that's step one. It's absolutely fundamental to setting up any kind of proper analysis. Okay, so the first pane of glass we're looking through is called the sagittal plane. Just picture a sheet of glass that slices you right down the middle, separating your left and right sides. This is the plane for all your forward and backward movements. Think about running, walking, doing a bicep curl. That's all sagittal plane stuff. It's flexion and extension. And if you want to capture it right on camera, you have to get a perfect side-on view. All right, next up, we've got the frontal plane. This time, the glass cuts you into a front half and a back half. And this is where all the side-to-side action happens. What the biomechanists call abduction and adduction. A perfect example, a jumping jack. Or think about a basketball player shuffling on defense. To get that right, you've got to be filming from directly in front or directly behind the athlete. And our third and final plane is the transverse plane. This one slices the body horizontally, giving you a top half and a bottom half. So, what happens here? Rotation, pure and simple. Think about a powerful golf swing, a discus throw, a dancer's pirouette. Those are all dominated by rotation around that central axis. And yeah, the perfect view for this is a bird's eye view, looking straight down. Okay, so why am I spending so much time on these planes? Why does this matter? Well, here's the deal. If you're doing any kind of 2D video analysis, which is what most of us are doing, your camera's view, its optical axis, has to be perfectly perpendicular at a 90-degree angle to whichever plane of motion you're trying to capture. If you're off even a little bit, you get something called perspective distortion, and that will completely wreck your measurements. Your angles, your distances, all of it becomes totally useless data. It's that important. So that leads us right into this, a super simple but critical checklist for getting perfect video every time. And I mean it, getting these 5 things right is non-negotiable. First, like we just said, camera at 90 degrees. Second, use a tripod. No shaky hands, no panning, no tilting, keep it stable. Third, you need a fast shutter speed to avoid motion blur. You want crisp, clear images. Fourth, a high frame rate. This lets you see all the little details that happen between the major movements. And finally, lock your focus and zoom before you hit record. That way, your shot stays consistent the whole time. Okay, so you've followed the rules, you've got this perfect video footage. Now what? How do you actually talk about what you're seeing? Well, there are basically 2 main ways to go about it. 2 different lenses you can look through, the qualitative lens and the quantitative lens. So, on one side, you've got qualitative analysis. Think of this as the coach's eye. It's all about using words to describe what you see. Words like explosive, smooth, or maybe unbalanced. The big plus here is that it's fast, it's easy, and it's perfect for making quick adjustments right there on the field. Then you have the other side of the coin, quantitative analysis. This is more like the scientist's ruler. Here, we're talking about hard numbers, measuring joint angles in degrees, velocities in meters per second, forces in newtons. It's totally objective and super precise, but it takes special gear and a lot more time.
So which one should you use? When is one better than the other? Well, for everyday coaching, especially with developing athletes or when you're short on resources, qualitative is often your go-to. It gets the job done. But if you're working with elite athletes, doing scientific research, or in an injury rehab setting, you absolutely need that quantitative data. There's no substitute for that level of precision. But here's the real pro tip. The best practice isn't an either-or situation, it's about combining them. You use the hard numbers to confirm or even challenge what your coach's eye is telling you. That's where the magic really happens.
All right, this is huge. This brings us to the absolute core of today's explainer. We're talking about a powerful, repeatable framework that takes you from just randomly watching someone to doing a structured, actionable analysis. Honestly, this system is what separates the guessers from the people who actually know.
And the whole thing boils down to a simple 4-stage process. That's it, just 4 steps. But the key is following them in order. That's what transforms a simple observation into a real insight. It forces you to be systematic and make sure you don't miss anything important.
So what are these 4 stages? Think of it as the analyst's journey. It starts with number 1, preparation. This is your homework phase. Then comes number 2, observation. This is when you collect your data. Number 3 is evaluation and diagnosis, where you figure out what it all means. And it all leads up to number 4, intervention. That's where you step in and actually make a change. Okay, let's peel back the layers now. We're going to go deep inside each of those 4 stages. This is where all that theory turns into a practical, step-by-step guide that you can actually use. So stage 1, preparation. This is all about creating your game plan before you even get started. You've got to ask yourself some really critical questions, like, what's the actual goal here? Are we trying to increase power, reduce injury risk? What does perfect technique even look like for this specific sport and for this specific person? You also need to know the performer's background, their skill level, their goals, any injuries. Based on all that, you have to decide exactly what critical features you're going to watch for. And you do all of this before you even think about hitting the record button. Honestly, you could argue this is the most important stage of them all, and it's the one people skip all the time. Okay, on to stage 2, observation. This is the data gathering phase. All that work you did in preparation, now's the time to execute that plan flawlessly. That means setting up your camera perfectly, following those 5 rules we talked about earlier. And here's a huge point. You have to record enough trials. You can't just record one attempt. A one-off could be a fluke, right? You need to see their typical, consistent performance to make a real assessment. Look for the patterns. All right, stage 3. This is where you put on your detective hat. It's evaluation and diagnosis time. You take the video you just shot and you compare it side by side with that ideal model you researched back in the prep stage. You're looking for both the strengths and the errors. But here's the key. You don't just list the mistakes. You have to diagnose the root cause. Is this person making this error because of a technique flaw or maybe a physical limitation, like they aren't flexible enough? And then, and this is crucial, you have to prioritize. You can't fix everything at once. You need to ask which single error is having the biggest negative impact, or which one can we fix first to get the biggest bang for our buck. And that brings us to the final step, stage 4, intervention. This is where the rubber meets the road. You're closing the loop. You give the athlete clear, concise feedback. We're not talking about a long lecture, maybe just one short, powerful coaching cue. Then you might give them a specific drill designed to correct that one big error you prioritized. And then, and this is the part that makes it a cycle, you reassess. You record again to see if your intervention actually worked. This whole process isn't a one-and-done thing. It's a continuous loop of improvement. Okay, to wrap things up and really complete our toolkit, let's talk for a minute about the physics behind all this. Because understanding these fundamental laws is what helps you get to the why, not just what the athlete is doing wrong, but why a certain technique works or doesn't work. It's the ultimate layer of understanding. Look, every single jump, throw, swing, or step in sports is governed by Newton's 3 laws of motion. It's that simple. His first law is about inertia. An object wants to stay put until a force moves it, so an athlete has to generate force just to get going. The second law, F equals ma, is a big one. It just means the more force you can apply to your body mass, the faster you'll accelerate. Pretty straightforward. And the third law is action-reaction. For every force you push into the ground to jump, the ground pushes back on you with an equal force, launching you into the air. These aren't just things you learn in a physics class. They are literally the reason performance happens the way it does. And that leads us to maybe one of the most important biomechanical concepts for power and speed. It's called proximal to distal sequencing. The easiest way to think about it is like cracking a whip. The movement starts from the big, strong muscles near the center of your body, your trunk and hips. That's the proximal part. Then, that energy flows outwards in a sequence, like a wave, to the smaller, faster-moving limbs at the end, the distal parts, like your hand for a throw or your foot for a kick. Getting that sequence right, that transfer of energy from big parts to small parts, that is the absolute secret to maximizing speed and power. So, let's tie this all up in a bow. What's the big idea here? It's this. Having a systematic approach isn't just some boring academic thing. It's a practical, essential tool. It's what takes coaching from just random guess and check to a real, repeatable science. It's about using both what you see and what you can measure to get way better results.
So there you have it. We've just built the entire toolkit. You know how to set up your camera, you know the different lenses to use, and you have a step-by-step framework to follow from start to finish. You've got everything you need to go way beyond just watching and start seeing the hidden details that truly unlock better performance. So the only question left for you is, what movement are you going to analyze first?